On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we preview Kansas going on the road to Arizona State.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thank you for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, including on that YouTube page. And on today's edition, we are getting to our full preview of Kansas, Arizona State. We had a crossover episode earlier this week, so thank you to the everydayers. If you already caught that one, this is more of the Kansas view of the preview here on this episode of the show to get you ready for the Saturday night game for KU going down to Arizona State. Before we get into the action, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. So, big storylines coming into this one for KU. You're just trying to pick yourself up off of the mat. At this point, your goals that you had before the season begun of winning the Big 12 and yada, 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 those are out the window, right? Those are not going to happen. Now, I guess, to me, the losing to TCU last week kind of felt like it was going to make it very difficult from here on out to even make a bowl game. But there still at least is that distant possibility of that, right? You have to go 5-2 the rest of the way, which given what we've seen, doesn't seem very likely, especially with still having to play at Arizona State, still having to play home against an Iowa State team that might have more fans for you in that game, and Iowa State looks really good. It doesn't seem very likely to even do that. But that said, obviously, if you are going to go 5-2 to make a bowl game, you have to win this one. But it's beyond that. It's picking yourself up off the mat to get the momentum going again, to reset the foundation for the next group, for the next team, to figure some things out headed into 2025, to just feel better about where you kind of are as a program and the team this season. And for Arizona State, they're trying to have a strong start to the season, which has already kind of happened, but they're coming off a loss to Texas Tech. And so they're going to be extra fired up as they try to move closer to bowl eligibility after having back-to-back, bad seasons for them. They're trying to get back to that point, and they have a good opportunity at home against what has been a vulnerable Kansas team to this point in time. The other big storyline of this one, it's the first meeting between these two as conference opponents. And for Kansas, maybe for KU fans, it's a fun travel spot. I would imagine that for going to road games, those are right. It's one thing if you have tickets to a home game, things might not be going well. You might sell the tickets. You might not go to the game. If you had a trip planned before the season started to go to this game, you bought airline tickets, you bought tickets to the game, probably not changing those plans up. So I would imagine there's still going to be a decent amount of KU fans. I mean, there actually is a big contingent of KU fans, a big alumni base that is in the Phoenix area. So you probably have some attendees for that. You'll probably have some attendees who are already planning on going because it's a new destination to go out to. And that kind of added to the intrigue and the opportunity in this one. You have the Desert Edge kids. Maybe they'll bring some good family and friends to the game that, adds to the KU home crowd. But I think I saw something that Arizona State was closing on a sellout, so they'll probably have a good home field advantage in this game. But obviously, it's always fun anytime you meet a new conference opponent. So for the Arizona State scouting report, right now their offense is 7th among the 16 teams in the Big 12 in points per game. Flip that to the KU's defense, which is 11th. Right now, they're only 14th in yards per play is Arizona State. KU defense more middle of the pack. They're at 8th. So for Arizona State, they're 11th in the conference in yards per pass. They're 14th in pass efficiency. So they haven't been super elite throwing the football. They're only 84th on Pro Football Focus in passing grade. But what they have been good at is pass blocking. They're 25th in the country in pass blocking grade so far on Pro Football Focus. So they've done a good job keeping the quarterback upright. They also have a quarterback who can scramble, which is obviously alarm bells start going off for KU football fans. They're 124th in receiving grades. That hasn't been great, but I do like some of the athleticism they have on the outside. Now, when you look at them running the football, they're 10th in yards per carry in the Big 12, but they're 4th in rushing yards per game. Only 89th in run blocking on Pro Football Focus. It's been mostly about just the dude running the football, which is Skattebo, who's one of the best running backs in the country. He's a physical runner. And because of that, they are 17th nationally in EPA per run. Part of that, too, the quarterback, again, can run a little bit. But overall, this is a pretty good running offense for Arizona State. Now, on the defensive side of the ball for the Sun Devils, they're 8th in the Big 12 in points allowed per game, about middle of the pack. Good news for them, Kansas is only 15th in points per game offensively. But here's where it really goes for Arizona State. They're second right now in the conference in yards allowed per play. So they're really not giving up much to do about anything over the course of the game. They are only 78th in tackling grade, so maybe that's been a bit of a bugaboo. We'll see if KU can exploit that a little bit. I think based on the Jeff Grimes offense, probably not built to be the type of offense that exploits that. But nonetheless, right now, what really could kill you in this game, Arizona State is first in the Big 12, number one in yards allowed per carry. 2.6 yards allowed per carry. That's it. Did go up the last 2 weeks, but only to 3.6 yards per carry the last 2 weeks. So there's been a good running defense. They're 12th nationally in EPA per run defense. And I scare you a little bit for KU because really, I mean, I said last week, like there was a point in Saturday's game where you felt like the only thing that KU could do well was run the football. And even that was starting to take a toll from the lack of passing game where defenses are putting 7 or 8 guys in the box and keen on you running the football. So if you're playing a good running defense, what does the offense look like for KU, right? If you can't run, if you have a game where you run for 3 yards per carry, 3.5 yards per carry, heck, even 4 yards per carry, I mean, that's very scary for KU because the offense already has struggled on its own while they've still been averaging 5 or 6 yards per carry in some of these games. Arizona State's 5th in yards allowed per pass. They're 8th in pass defense efficiency, but they are just 108th in pass rush grade, though I do like some of the athleticism on the edge for them. And then they're 78th in coverage grade. So it's not as much of a weak point as maybe like West Virginia was, maybe even TCU in the passing defense, but there is enough there that you can be like, okay, they do have an opportunity. Problem is you haven't been able to take advantage of that to this point in time. One other thing to note is special teams. Arizona State is one of 4 teams in the Big 12 to miss a PAT, and they've also gone just 7 of 10 on field goals. So if this is a game that comes down to Arizona State making some kicks, they haven't really been able to do so far. The importance of this game, though, this season ain't happening right now for KU, but it's still important to avoid bottoming out, right? It is important that in your bad seasons, you are not the worst. It is important from a program building perspective. It is important from a recruiting perspective. It is important from a momentum perspective. So if Kansas' bad season, yes, it would absolutely suck because this was supposed to be a target season with as many seniors and good players as they brought back and talent that they have. But still, at the end of the day, if your bad seasons end up being 4 or 5 win seasons, that is a much better place to be in for Kansas football, who hadn't won 4 games till Lance Leipold arrived, till you had to go back to Mark Mangino. So point being, if you can make your bad season, which at this point, this is a bad season, if you can salvage this bad season to turn it into a 4 or 5 win season, as opposed to bottoming out and being a 2 or 3 win team, that is still important to a certain standpoint. That's what's important in this game. Getting off the mat a little bit, regaining that momentum, right? Headed into a bye week, getting the right taste in your mouth. I think for Jalon Daniels and Jeff Grimes, this is a gigantic game for both those guys. Now, I continue to kind of lean toward the idea that Lance Leipold, over the course of his time as a coach, whether it's been at Buffalo, whether it's been at Kansas, track record will show you he is very patient. He's not going to make quick changes. But if ever there were a time to make a change, whether it's the play caller, whether it's the quarterback, whatever it ends up being, it would be during a bye week. You get the extra time to install things and get somebody ready. And so if you're Jalon Daniels, if you're Jeff Grimes, you might be fighting for your life. You might be fighting for your job in this game. Again, gut reaction would tell me that Lance Leipold's going to give him more time than that, but certainly the fan base pressure would probably want that to be the case. And if ever you were going to make a change, this would be the one. So for both guys, if you have a horrendous game, it certainly is a problem heading into a bye week. And you just want to get right about how you're feeling about those guys and this team headed into the bye and then the Houston home game after that. All right, let's get into our matchups of the game, players to watch. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. You can get in on some action for this KU Arizona State game. We're going to be giving out some stuff brought to you by FanDuel, or at least taking a look at what the lines are later on in the show. That is at FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Well, thank you to the everydayers tuning in to each and every episode of the show. Don't forget, you can make Locked On College Football or Locked On Big 12 or one of these other schools, or if you're into an NBA team or MLB team, whatever it is, You can make that your first listen every day, or make that your second listen every day, with this being your first listen every day, whatever the order that you would like. Okay, let's get on to our matchups of the game before we get into our player watch on this episode of the show. Let's get to first down. Can KU dominate at the interior with their defensive tackles? So basically, can the KU defensive tackles dominate this football game? Arizona State can still throw the football. And I think after what we saw last week with the KU TCU game, like, there are clearly questions about what does the pass defense look like now for Kansas. Now, I do think a bit of that was TCU is one of the better passing teams in the country. I do think a bit of that was a bad stylistic matchup with what TCU wants to do and what Kansas likes to do defensively. And the fact that Kansas isn't one of those teams that makes these big adjustments throughout the game or throughout the season. And so from that standpoint, it was kind of a bad matchup. Now, does Arizona State just take advantage of that too? It's entirely possible, right? But that kind of becomes the question. But still, Arizona State, I would think, is less equipped to do what TCU did to the Kansas defense than what they have. And so for me, this comes down to a couple things. One, Arizona State's pass blocking has been good. The one area you've been able to exploit Arizona State's O-line, like they rank really well on Pro Football Focus on the outside, is the interior. Good news for KU is the interior of their D-line has been good so far. So, I'm looking at Blake Harrell. I'm looking at Tommy Dunn. I'm looking at, DJ Withers and Caleb Taylor and Keenan Caldwell. I'm looking at these guys. Can, one or two of them make a couple key plays? Can they have a sack? Can they have another couple quarterback pressures out of that D-tackle room? But beyond that, Arizona State is a very good running football team, and Cam Skattebo is a stud. You have to meet him at the point of attack. He's going to break a lot of tackles if you have DBs trying to cut him down, because that dude's a physical, strong runner of the football. So get those D tackles on him, make that penetration, force him to the outside where it becomes more predictable about where he's having to run the football. Can the KU D tackles dominate this game? If so, then maybe you can slow down that Arizona State offense. All right, second down is the red zone. KU's actually been really good offensively in the red zone so far. For all the offensive struggles that they've had, this has not been one of them. They're a perfect 18 of 18 so far with 14 touchdowns. That is a great job. Now, the fact that I just said that probably means that they're going to have a mess up this week in the red zone. Nonetheless, Arizona's defense has struggled in the red zone, actually. Teams are a perfect 11 of 11 against Arizona State in the red zone. But what gets me more, it's what they give. They've given up 11-11 in the red zone. It's like, oh, they've given up 6 field goals. And it's like, they're doing a pretty good job. They've given up 9 touchdowns and 11 red zone trips. So once teams get in the red zone, they've really had an easy time scoring against Arizona State. And Kansas overall has done a good job once they've gotten into the red zone. Again, does that carry over into this game? Did I just jinx it with the old announcer skirts? Entirely possible. But on paper, that's an advantage for KU. The one thing, though, that does scare me to making it so that this would be a time where KU doesn't get a red zone score. Of those 9 touchdowns that Arizona State's given up in the red zone, 7 of the 9 are passing. They've walled teams off in the red zone in the run. So when you look at what Kansas does well in the red zone, it's running the football. It hasn't been throwing the ball in the tight windows with Jalon Daniels down there. That maybe doesn't make it so great. But now on the flip side, Arizona State is currently 13th in the Big 12 in red zone scoring rate. And KU has only given up touchdowns on less than half of opposing offenses' red zone trips. So KU's actually been pretty decent in the red zone so far. Arizona State has not been on the offense side of the ball. On paper, both of these are advantages KU. If it stays that way, great. But if it turns, that's a huge win for Arizona State when KU is having to already win on the margins. Third down, open the running game by attacking the linebackers in coverage. So Kansas is seeing a lot of 7 or 8 man boxes right now, right? And it's turning runs that could be 2, 3, 4 yard gains into 0 or 1 yard gains. It's turning runs that are 4, 5, 6, 7 yard gains for KU, or turning those runs that could have been 10, 12, 15 yard runs into those 4, 5, 6, 7 yard runs. It's turning runs that are maybe first down 10 yard runs from what could have originally been maybe a 60 yard breakaway touchdown, right? It's just making things tough, right? If you have all 5 of your offensive linemen pancake an opposing guy, okay, now your running back can make one guy miss, but if there's 2 other guys in the box, it's going to be tough for something else to happen, right? So you look at the Arizona State linebackers, they've been fine overall in their overall game, but the 3 linebackers who have played 100 or more snaps for Arizona State so far this year, here's their following coverage grades: 58.9, 56.7, and 52.9. What does that tell you? You can hit them in the passing game. And so if you do hit them in the passing game, does it force them to switch their personnel where they have to bring in, an extra defensive back? Does it force them to switch their personnel where they're having to not load the box and play guys more spread out or off behind where it helps your running game a little bit more? You have to be able to attack their linebackers in coverage. The negative for KU here is they have not done this well this year. I don't know if with a smaller quarterback, Kotelnicki did a better job of just moving Jalon Daniels out of the pocket to where now Jeff Grimes trying to make him more pocket passer. It's tougher to see behind the big offensive lineman. I don't know if it's just Jalon's lack of confidence. I don't know if it's the play calling or what. I don't know if it's Jalon not wanting to go over the middle. We went over those numbers earlier this week that the numbers over the middle, the completion percentage way down, the touchdown to interception way down, the yards per attempt way down. But this is a game you have to exploit it over the middle. Whether it's throwing to running backs, feels like KU hasn't really utilized the running backs enough in the passing game. Whether it's throwing to tight ends, they clearly haven't used those enough in the passing game. Whether it's throwing to receivers in the intermediate and over the middle. And if you do, I think it's going to cause those linebackers struggles to where they're either going to have to adjust and it's going to open up your running game, or they're just going to get hurt by it all game long and it'll be Jalon Daniels' best passing game. But can you actually take advantage of that? If, again, it's Jalon, if it's Jeff Grimes, it's the combo of the two. They have to figure it out. And if they do, they'll have a lot of success doing it. And if they don't, it'll just be more of the same from what we've already seen. Fourth down here is Kansas's offensive line against edge pressures and blitzes. Arizona State has 52 pressures so far this season. 29 of those, so more than half, come from their top three players here, which are all edge rushers. 10 or more of them come from safeties, linebackers, corners, that combo on blitzes. So that's 39 pressures of the 52 that they're getting from basically either edge rushers or blitzes. That's good for almost 8 per game from just that specific category. So far, Kansas has allowed 25 pressures. That is 5 per game. They had a good pass blocking game last week. They had a few key mistakes and key moments, though. Struggled a few weeks ago in pass blocking, but before that had a strong start. If the key to opening up more in the box is passing the football, the offensive line has to be able to hold up for Jalon to deliver the ball to the receivers. And Arizona State, has some talent on the outside. They have some athleticism, but it's also a scheme that is going to throw some blitzes at you. And Kansas is going to have to be sharp mentally to pick up some of those blitzes as well. As far as our player matchup here, we're going to go with J.B. Brown / Cornell Wheeler / Taiwan Berryhill. I don't know if Wheeler's going to be playing, so maybe more likely Brown and Berryhill versus Cam Skattebo. Cam Skattebo, the stud running back for Arizona State, just breaks so many tackles. He is a tough physical runner of the football. Your linebackers have to have a good day tackling. Otherwise, Cam Skattebo is going to keep breaking tackles. And so that one just becomes big for Kansas trying to slow down the running game. I will say honorable mention here to Luke Grimm versus Shamari Simmons, who is Arizona State's stud slot defensive back. Both of those are two really good players. There's going to be a lot of good battles between those two throughout the game. Let's finish up here with Hawks to Soar, pick a prop. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode here is brought to you by Game Time, where you can get tickets to whether you're going to the Arizona, like maybe you are going to the Arizona State game, maybe you're traveling out there, but you don't have tickets yet. Well, check out Game Time, which has this new awesome feature called Game Time Picks that help filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Maybe you're looking to go to the Royals game, right? I mean, maybe you're not going up to New York for Saturday or the following Monday's games, but maybe you're looking at going to the Wednesday game for the Royals. And I'm looking on Game Time right now. Let's see. They have a Game Time pick here where you can get into the stadium for $276. You can, if you want to spend a pretty penny, right? You want to sit right behind home plate. You got a couple grand to throw around. I'm looking at $2,000 for Diamond Club seats behind home plate, right? Blow the kids' college fund. Don't actually, but download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, we are going to get to our Hawks to Soar and our pick a prop here on Locked On Jayhawks, and we will be back this weekend to give you a postcast episode. I guess it'll be late into the night because this one kicks off at 7 o'clock Central Time, so that'd make it 5 o'clock local time, or I don't even know. Arizona goes between Pacific Time and Mountain Time, so they might be at 6 o'clock local time. I don't know what it is right now. Anyway, regardless, it'll be late into the night when that happens. All right, I'll pick a prop here, or I'm sorry, Hawks to Soar. Offense, it should be a tight end. Based on those linebackers not having good coverage grades, this would be a game where Andy Kotelnicki would be able to find Mason Fairchild or Jared Casey or whatever for a bunch of big catches. Unfortunately, it feels like Jeff Grimes is not using them, and or Jalen Daniels is just not throwing them the football. So another thing would be receptions to running backs in the passing game. Again, they're not really doing that. So I guess we're going to go with LJ Arnold. It feels like LJ Arnold can be that intermediate over the middle receiving threat. Didn't have his best game last week. I think he'll bounce back a little bit because I think he's a good enough player. Arizona State does have that good slot corner. Their PFF grades for the outside corners on the flanks haven't been as good. They are good at safety, but KU needs a bounce back game from Arnold as well to do well. And even though Jeff Grimes had that weird quote this week about getting them going, I do think it is going to be important to try to get them going. So I'll go with LJ Arnold there. On the defensive side of the football, this one, I'm going to go with DJ Warner. It's a homecoming for the Desert Edge kids, and KU needs someone to step up at defensive end. They've had good players at defense tackle. We talked earlier this week about some of the grades that KU has compared to the Big 12. KU's DNs, Robinson ranks solid, above average. Woodkey is right around the average mark, but they haven't had the overall play. And I feel like DJ Warner is getting closer to usurping Dean Miller. This homecoming game for him, I'd imagine they're going to have a lot of family and friends in attendance to this one. Maybe it's a bit of wish casting. Arizona State has good tackles to deal with him, but I think he'll be extra juiced up to go in this one, and maybe he can get a big sack for KU on the edge or have a couple pressures for KU. All right, as far as our pick-a prop here, I'm looking on FanDuel right now. Jalen Daniels' passing yards is only 179.5. He has not gotten to 200 this year, so it's not like that's like a crazy number to be that low. I'm going to go over on it, though, is going to be my scoop, because Arizona State has a really good run defense. Kansas is going to constantly be in third down and mediums and third and longs, probably more than they have been in any other game this season. You're going to have to throw the football, right? This could be a game where Jalon has his most attempts, and it's still not a great game, but he still has 200 yards. So I am going to go with that. And there, again, maybe there's a bit of wish casting that something gets done. I said LJ Arnold is a player to prop. Maybe that would be the other one because his over-under for receiving yards is only 34.5. Then you look at the rushing props. Devin Neal's down at 86.5. That's because of the defense. Cam Skattebo, 82.5. I'd probably go over on that. Sam Levitt, 34.5 is their quarterback. We've seen KU struggle stopping running quarterbacks, 34.5. So that would be one that I would certainly look to, that I'd be of interest. And then if you're looking for a sprinkle play, maybe something further down the line of, I don't know, you could have fun with this. Like, I know they haven't been targeting the tight ends, but Jared Casey plus 490 anytime touchdown. Like I said, if ever there was a game to get the tight ends or the running backs involved in the receiving game against these linebackers, that would be the one. And going back to the well of LJ Arnold plus 230 for anytime touchdown are ones that you could possibly sprinkle on. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll be back for a postcast later this weekend. Have a great rest of your weekend. And if you're heading out to the games, safe travels.